This date, September the 13th, 1972, from the city of Blackwell, Oklahoma. We're interviewing for the Oklahoma Christian College and the top of Oklahoma Historical Society of Blackwell. Today we are interviewing Mr. Harry A. Bathurst of Blackwell, Oklahoma. Your interviewer is James Katigan for the Oklahoma Living Legends. Mr. Bathurst, in bringing up this history of Oklahoma, give us your background and what brought you to Oklahoma?
I was born in Alton, Kansas. That's in Osborne County, Kansas, on a farm about 7 or 8 miles out of town. And when I was about 4 years old, my folks decided to come to Oklahoma. My father did not make the run in 1893, but he came down in 1900 and filed on a claim about 25 miles south of Alva, Oklahoma, in Woods County. I remember when my father was getting ready to leave Kansas that he bought a team of mules for him to drive, hitched them to a wagon that carried all of the supplies, and my mother and my sisters then came in a covered wagon with this team of mules hitched to our wagon. My father had a team of horses, and I remember on the road that those horses were quite lively and the mules were slow. My father would get clear out of sight, and I, as a boy, would worry that I'd never see my father again. Of course, my mother would reassure me. It took us about 2 weeks to make it from Osborne County to where we filed on a claim south of Alva. However, my folks stopped a few days at a little town by the name of Paradise, Kansas, and visited some people on the road. We actually made about 40 miles a day in the old covered wagon. After my father filed on the farm, and he dug a little half dugout, and we lived in that for about a year while he was building the other house, which we later occupied. Times were very hard, as I recall, and money was very scarce. We lived principally on quail, and well, my father didn't like jackrabbits, so we seldom ate anything other than quail in the meat line. However, we never suffered for plenty to eat, but we had very, very little money. I remember one night while living in this dugout, this half dugout, that we woke up in the morning with a big snake crawling around on the floor. The floor was a dirt floor. Let's see.
Mr. Bathurst, do you remember very many incidents that happened in and about this dugout home of yours while you were coming this way?
Well, I recall living in this dugout for just about a year. My father went up into Kansas and bought lumber to build our new house on, which was just a one-room house built out of stockade lumber. And we lived in that after about the first year. The first year was very hard, and my father would have to go to Kansas during the summertime and work in the harvest fields in order to get a little money to keep things going. And I recall one time when we were living in this half dugout that my aunt from South Haven, Kansas, came to visit us, and there were bald sand hills about 5 miles south of our place, a part of what is now near Winoka, Oklahoma. My mother wanted to show my aunt those sand hills, and we started real early one morning with one horse and a buggy with my sister, my youngest sister, and my aunt and my mother. And we went out on the sand. We drove down there and tied our horse to the fence, went out on the sand hills, and was having quite a time. And finally we decided it was time to go home, and we started to go back to our horse, and my mother lost her directions, and we wandered over the sand hills all day, a very hot, scalding day, and we couldn't find our horse. And finally, way late in the evening, when my mother was just about to give it up, we got on top of a big sand hill, and we happened to see a little shanty. And we went to that, and we were all so thirsty and so hot. I drank too much cold water and almost passed out. And in the meantime, my father had come home with my uncle, and he had spread the alarm, and the whole neighborhood was out hunting for us, and they made it up to fire shotguns if we were found. And finally, this little cabin that we found took us to a postmaster's place, and he had a fine team of horses, and he sounded the alarm that we were found and loaned us his horses to drive home. So that was quite an experience that I shall never forget. Then when I became 6 years old, I went to the little country schoolhouse in southern Woods County, which was district number 88, and I recall very well that I was there going to school and was out on the playgrounds the day that somebody announced that Oklahoma had become a state. And of course our little community had a great celebration over that. We didn't have many places for entertainment back in those days, but about the only thing we had was ciphering matches and spelling bees. But we did have them once a week, and the whole community would turn out, and everybody was interested in everybody else, and really we didn't have such a bad life after all. My wife, my first wife that I married in 1920, was born on a claim that her father took in the race in Alfalfa County, north of Cherokee, and near a little town by the name of Driftwood. And that's where my family was raised. I married Iva Cloyd in 1920, and we lived in and around Burlington. I taught school in Burlington for 6 years, and was on the school board on the Burlington's Board of Education for 6 years. Then we moved over on my wife's father's homestead, which is still in the family, and she, by the way, became ill in 1944 and died there on the same place where she was born. And we had 3 boys. My oldest son, Verlin, was born on the old homestead, which we still have in the family, and went to war in 1942 and became a member of the Air Corps and was shot down over Germany in 1945. My other 2 sons grew up in Alfalfa County. We moved to Blackwell, Oklahoma in 1947. They married young women that they had become acquainted with, and they now both live near Blackwell. We farm about 16 quarter sections of land in and around Blackwell. There's
Mr. Bathurst, tell us some of your experiences in World War I when you joined up in 1918?
Yes. As I said before, I became a school teacher when I was a young man. I was in 1918. I was teaching school when my draft number came up, and I joined the Army in 1918. At that time, the people were very patriotic. I remember the day that I went to the Army. Several other young men went at the same time. The little town of Cherokee, which is the county seat of Alfalfa County, had a big celebration. They put on a free dinner for us. They had the bands playing. We had speaking. And the whole town, in fact, the whole county, went to the depot to see us off. And about 25 years later, when my son, Verlin, went to the Army, I don't think anybody outside of the immediate family knew anything about it. There was a bus came through town and picked up the boys, and they went on. No celebration, no goodbyes or anything of the kind. Quite very much different than when I went to the Army. After I'd been in camp a few years, or not a few years, but a few weeks, the Spanish flu broke out, and my buddies, nearly all of them, took the flu and went to the hospital. As long as there was room in the hospital, the hospitals became full, and they put beds in the aisles, and later on, even the aisles became so full that they had to put the sick boys in the kitchens, and they had very little care, and they just died like flies. Also in World War I, they were using lots of horses. We had many wonderful, fine horses in our camp, and they also got something that was very similar to the flu, and they died like flies. So it looked like for a while that things were pretty serious. We were all very glad when the armistice was signed, and we were later told that we could go home. However, I was sent to the headquarters to fill out discharges for several weeks.
Mr. Bathurst, we understand your father had a problem in filing a claim for land in the early days. Will you tell us all about this?
As I said before, my father did not come in the race, but we came in 1900, and he filed on a piece of government land 25 miles south of Alva in what is now Woods County, and was Woods County at that time, although Woods County at that time comprised all of Alfalfa County and Major and, I don't know, a large number of counties that were afterward formed out of Woods. We were about, as I say, about 25 miles south of Alva, and those of you who know that country know that it is rather sandy. And my father's land was not very productive as far as agricultural products was concerned, but it was fine grassland. We lived there, and we children, I had 3 sisters, I had no brothers. We attended the rural school, number 88 in Woods County, and all of us graduated from that little rural school. And I later went to Northwestern at Alva. As I probably said a while ago, in 1920 I married a girl whose father came down in the race, Perry Cloyd. That was over in Alfalfa County. We moved over there in 1913 from claim in Woods County. And we still have the old homestead in the family that my father-in-law took in the race in 1893. And my first wife, the boy's mother, was born on that farm and died on the farm where she was born. Long about 1947, the farmland began to get very high priced in Alfalfa County, and I didn't have enough farmland over there for my boys. They were growing up and needing more farmland. So I came over to K County in 1947 and bought my first farm, which now joins the city limits of Blackwell, where we now reside. And we have lived in Blackwell since 1947, and farm a great deal of land around here. My two sons also live here.
Mr. Bathurst, tell us something about and what you remember about your entry into as an agent for the Oklahoma Farm Bureau and your real estate program.
I was a charter member of the Oklahoma Farm Bureau, joined the Farm Bureau over in Alfalfa County. And when I came to Kay County, of course, I immediately hunted up the Farm Bureau boys and became very active in Kay County and was appointed a general agent of Kay County along about in the late 40s, I guess the late 40s. And I was general agent here in Kay County for something like 15 years. And during that time, I became quite well acquainted with most of the farmers in the county and we had a lot of other patrons too as well. And I learned to love Kay County very much and have no idea of ever leaving. At the time of the great cyclone that we had in 1955, our Farm Bureau office had the roof torn entirely off of it, and I was called about the middle of the night telling me that the Farm Bureau office was in very bad shape, and I went down there and I had a hard time even getting down there. At that same storm, I was out home when the cyclone hit. We have no cellar out there, and I stood on the front porch and heard the roaring of the cyclone as it was tearing up Blackwell, and it sounded like a freight train, a big freight train going through town. And I spent the rest of the night then downtown trying to help with those that were hurt and those that had no home, and we opened our house and had some of them come out to our place to spend the night. So that was quite an experience that I've had here in Kay County. I retired from the Farm Bureau office in 1964, and at that time I became a real estate broker and have been engaged in real estate selling ever since I was licensed about 1965, I believe in January of 1965. I was very ill in 63 and 64 and 65, so I retired from farming at that time and have not been active, although I've always been have had interest in the farm.
Mr. Bathurst, up in this country, we're right in the middle of the big wheat belt. Tell us what part you and your sons have been playing in wheat and agriculture in Oklahoma, in this part of the state.
Well, I've always been a farmer and have always loved the farm. Here in Kay County, we have been farming about 16 quarter sections of land. We raised one year 60,000 bushels of grain, and my boys have 4 drills running at this time on the 13th of September. We have 4 drills running. We also handle a lot of cattle on the wheat pasture, which the last few years has been a very profitable enterprise. But beyond that, we love it is the reason we do it. Some years the financial return is not so great. However, I would have to say that farm life has been very good to me, and I have no regrets of having been a farmer, and in fact I am proud of the fact that I grew up on the farm and that I spent most of my life as a farmer. Although I taught school for 13 years, a lot of this is consecutive. I don't want you to think I'm that old. I taught school for 13 years and was 15 years, as I said before, in the farm general agent of Farm Bureau, and I've been several years in the real estate business.
Mr. Bathurst, does your sons, they are now taking an active part in farming. Do they live on the farm with you, or and is you're farming it all together? Is it right in the vicinity of Blackwell, and how is it located? And pinpointing it at the directions of Blackwell, and tell us more about your sons that's in the farming and wheat raising business with you.
My home farm is right at the edge of, right the west edge of Blackwell, right south of the General Hospital. That's our extreme southern, most southern farm, which my sons now farm. And about 15 miles up by the Blackwell Lake is what we call the Bremen Farm, and that is the other extremity. There's about 15 miles difference between them. And in between, around Blackwell, we farm about 9 quarter sections of land. And about 4 miles farther on, northwest, we have a quarter section, which is known as the Caney Farm. And about a little bit north of the Caney Farm, we bought what was known as the Williams Ranch. We have 4 quarter sections there, 2 half sections. One half section lies long ways east and west, and the other lies north and south. And about a mile west and 2 miles north, we have 1 more quarter, which is I bought from Max Rogers, which belonged to his mother-in-law, who died, or his grandmother rather, who died at the age of 99 years. She almost made it to 100. And north of that, we have the extremely northern farm, which we call the Bremen Farm. There's 380s there, 240 acres. My sons run about 500 head, from 500 to 700 head of cattle on wheat pasture in the wintertime, and we raise wheat exclusively. We don't feel able to buy machinery for a row crop and wheat crop at the same both, so what we can't plant to wheat. Of course, we use the substitution method. Those of you who understand the government plan know that you can substitute your acreage for sorghum grains and oats and such as that. You can substitute wheat for that, and that's what we do. We plant as much wheat as we are allowed on our allotment, plus whatever we're allowed on the other grains, which makes us quite a little bit of wheat. The rest of the ground that we have to use as compliance ground, we leave absolutely idle. We don't plant anything on it, just keep it cultivated. I would like to say right here that I had 3 sons, and my oldest son was in the Army in World War II and was in the American Air Force, on the American side, and he was killed, was shot down over Germany, and is buried in Holland, at Margareton, Holland. And I have visited his grave 2 different times, and both of my sons have also visited his grave at different times.
Mr. Bathurst, give us a little more background and about your sons, and then a little more information about your families, or what they have to do associated with you in the farming and growing of wheat.
My oldest son, Elmore, lives about 2 miles north of town, north of my place. However, his farm, which is owned in partnership between him and Lloyd, joins the Trap Addition on the north. So his farm also joins the city limits of Blackwell. And Lloyd built a new house a few years ago on the south part of my home farm, but it was taken into the city, and that part is not any longer a part of my farm. It belongs to the city. My son Elmore has one son, and who is 17 years old, and 2 daughters. His youngest daughter just gave birth to a great grandson this week, which I'm very proud of. My son Lloyd has 2 children, Doug, who is 17 years old and is attending college at NOC, and Rose Cara, who is in the junior high here at Blackwell. Referring to our wheat again, we have all been, the boys and myself have been very much interested in wheat, and we have been very active members of the Oklahoma Wheat Growers Association. I was a state director for a good many years, and Elmore was appointed by Governor Bellman on the Wheat Commission when it was first organized, and he served on that commission for 10 years, and during that time took a trip to some of the foreign countries in the interest of wheat. And we think that the Wheat Growers Association, not only the Oklahoma Wheat Growers Association, but we are affiliated with the Great Plains Wheat, which has headquarters in Kansas, and we think that we've had quite a little influence in getting the sale to Russia, which President Nixon finished here a while back. We love wheat farming, and as I said before, one year we raised 60,000 bushels of grain. Most of it was wheat. I believe there was about 3,000 bushels of barley at the time, and maybe a little oats. But we do try to be good wheat farmers, and that's our whole life. We usually get our land plowed in June, and very seldom run over into July more than 2 or 3 days. We believe that early plowing is a secret of raising wheat in this western country. And also, good seed wheat is very important. We buy foundation seed wheat from our neighbor, Mr. Claybaker, Max Claybaker, who is very specialist in seed. We buy a new seed from him at least every 3 years, and I think usually a little oftener than that. And we raise about 3 varieties of wheat. Triumph has always been a very popular variety with us, and we also raise some of the other varieties also. Should I say any more than that?
Mr. Bathurst, since you have displayed in such an elegant manner the history of this part of Oklahoma, especially around Blackwell and Katigan County, what would you predict for the future for your boys and your family here in the city of Blackwell?
Well, I think the future looks very bright. As my sons and myself, none of us have any idea of ever leaving Blackwell. I believe that the future for farming is going to be much greater and much better than it has been the last 20 years. The last 20 years hasn't been too good. you take the period beginning about 1934, for 15 or 20 years, farming was wonderful. The machinery that we had to buy was very reasonable. Wages were reasonable, and prices were high. The last 10 or 15 years have been pretty hard. The reverse has just been true. Wheat has been low, and machinery has been high, and wages have been high. But I believe this condition is going to level off so that the laboring man can live and still leave a profit for the farmer. And personally, I would recommend to any young man who is starting life that he seriously consider farming. It, in the long run, I think it beats anything he could do.
Today, on September the 13th, 1972, from the city of Blackwell, we are interviewing Mr. Harry A. Bathurst for the top of Oklahoma Historical Society and the Oklahoma Living Legend. Your interviewer is James Katigan.